guts, Barry.
Have you ever wondered why the most iconic post-apocalyptic vehicle ever filmed was actually just a regular family car with a body kit? What if I told you the legendary V8 Interceptor from Mad Max started life as a plain police sedan, and the secrets behind its transformation are wilder than the wasteland itself? Today we're counting down 20 hidden secrets about Max's 1973 V8 Interceptor that will completely change how you see this cinematic legend. Number 20. It was actually a Ford Falcon XB GT. The V8 Interceptor wasn't some custom-built supercar. It was a 1973 Ford Falcon XB GT, a production car you could buy from any Australian Ford dealership. This wasn't even a rare model. Ford sold thousands of them to regular families across Australia. The XB GT was basically Australia's muscle car, their answer to American Mustangs and Camaros. It came from the factory with a 351 cubic inch Cleveland 5.8 engine, producing around 300 horsepower. Decent power, but nothing extraordinary for the era. The car featured a 4-speed manual transmission, heavy-duty suspension, and upgraded brakes. Standard GT equipment included blackout paint treatments, sports wheels, and aggressive styling cues. But strip away the factory performance package, and you had a Falcon sedan that housewives drove to the grocery store. Director George Miller chose the Falcon XB specifically because it looked futuristic without expensive modifications. The long hood and fastback roofline gave it an aggressive stance. The blacked-out trim made it look sinister. Miller realized he could transform this ordinary muscle car into something extraordinary with minimal budget. The production company bought the used car from a Melbourne dealership for 3,500 Australian dollars. That's roughly 12,000 in today's money. They weren't buying a movie star vehicle. They were buying cheap transportation that happened to look mean. The genius was recognizing that potential in an ordinary car that thousands of Australians drove daily without realizing it could become a post-apocalyptic legend. Number 19. The supercharger was completely fake. That massive Hawaiian supercharger sticking through the hood wasn't connected to anything. It was a complete fake, a non-functional prop bolted to a piece of plywood. The production couldn't afford a real supercharger installation, which would have cost thousands and required extensive engine modifications. So they bought a used Hawaiian blower case from a speed shop for $200 and mounted it on wood. The supercharger wasn't even bolted to the engine. It sat on a wooden platform attached to the hood itself. When the hood opened, the fake blower came with it. Underneath sat the completely stock Cleveland V8 with its standard single 4-barrel carburetor. The deception worked perfectly on camera. The intimidating blower jutting through the hood looked absolutely menacing. It suggested massive power lurking under that black paint. Audiences assumed the Interceptor was supercharged, which added to its mystique. But the car made exactly the same horsepower as any factory XB GT. The fake supercharger caused practical problems, though. The wooden mounting platform wasn't very sturdy. During hard driving scenes, the blower would shake and rattle violently. They had to secure it with additional straps and wires to keep it from flying off. The weight distribution was also affected. Having that heavy chunk of aluminum mounted high on the hood raised the center of gravity. The car's handling suffered slightly, becoming more top-heavy in corners. But the visual impact was worth the compromises. That fake supercharger became the Interceptor's most recognizable feature, despite being completely non-functional. Number 18. Multiple cars were used and destroyed. The production didn't rely on just one Interceptor. They bought 3 separate Ford Falcon XBs for filming, knowing the brutal action would destroy them. Car number 1 was the hero car, used for close-ups and dialogue scenes. It received the full treatment with the supercharger, side pipes, and custom paint. Car number 2 was the stunt car, reinforced for jumps and hard driving. It had a roll cage hidden inside and strengthened suspension components. Car number 3 was the sacrifice car, built specifically to be wrecked. Each car was slightly different mechanically. The hero car had the best-looking bodywork, but a tired engine. The stunt car had a fresh motor built for reliability and power. The crash car was a rolling disaster. barely running, but held together just long enough for its final scene. By the end of filming, only one car remained drivable. The crash car was completely destroyed as planned. The stunt car had damaged suspension and a blown transmission from the intense driving sequences. The hero car survived relatively intact, but needed extensive repairs. This multi-car approach was standard for action movies, but Mad Max's tiny budget made it challenging. They couldn't afford extensive backups like Hollywood productions. Each car had to serve multiple purposes. When the stunt car's transmission failed, they'd quickly swap the hero car in and shoot carefully to hide any body damage. When the hero car's engine overheated, they'd use the stunt car for close-ups and hope nobody noticed the slightly different paint. The constant vehicle juggling added stress to an already chaotic production, but it kept the cameras rolling when a single car approach would have shut everything down. Number 17. The side pipes were functional but dangerous. Those aggressive side exhaust pipes weren't just for show. They actually worked, routing exhaust gases out along the rocker panels. But they created serious safety hazards during filming. The installation was crude. They cut the stock exhaust system and welded pipes that exited just behind the front wheels. The pipes were made from basic steel tubing with no heat shielding or protection. They got extremely hot during operation, hot enough to ignite spilled gasoline or burn anyone who touched them. During filming, crew members suffered multiple burns from accidentally brushing against the pipes. Mel Gibson himself got burned during one take, touching the pipes while exiting the car quickly. He had to continue the scene despite the pain, and they used that take in the final film. The heat also affected the car's body. The side pipes ran so close to the door sills that paint would blister and bubble from the temperature. The production had to repaint the lower body panels constantly. The exhaust note from the side pipes sounded absolutely incredible though. The unmuffled V8 created that distinctive aggressive rumble that became synonymous with the Interceptor. The sound was so good that audio engineers recorded it extensively for use throughout the film. They even used those recordings in Mad Max 2 when they had different vehicles. The side pipes also created a cool visual effect. During night filming, they'd glow red hot, adding drama to chase scenes. You can spot this in several shots if you look carefully. Despite the burns, the heat damage, and the constant maintenance, everyone agreed the side pipes were worth the trouble for the sound and appearance they provided. Number 16. The yellow Interceptor wasn't originally yellow. In the original Mad Max, the Interceptor was black. That iconic yellow paint job everyone remembers, that came later in Mad Max 2, also called the Road Warrior. But here's the weird part. The production didn't repaint the original hero car. They built a completely new Interceptor for the sequel using a different Ford Falcon XB. The original black Interceptor had been sold after the first film wrapped. The production was broken and needed money. They sold the hero car to a private buyer in Melbourne for $5,000. When Mad Max 2 got greenlit 4 years later, with a much bigger budget, they needed the Interceptor back. But tracking down the original owner proved impossible. He'd moved, possibly interstate, and nobody knew where the car ended up. So, they did what movie productions do. They built another one. They found a different 1973 XB and started modifications. This time they had money for better quality work. The supercharger was still fake, but mounted more securely. The side pipes were properly heat shielded. Everything was more professional. The decision to paint it yellow came from director George Miller, wanting the car to stand out in desert locations. Black looked great in urban settings, but disappeared in bright Australian outback sunlight. Yellow solved that problem while adding visual pop. The paint was actually called yellow ochre, a specific Ford factory color. They mixed modern yellow paint with brown tones to create a weathered, post-apocalyptic appearance. The yellow Interceptor became so iconic that most people forget it was ever black, and many fans assume the same car appeared in both films when they were actually completely different vehicles. Number 15. The interior was left completely stock. Open the door of the Interceptor, and you'd find something surprising. The interior was completely stock, exactly as it came from the Ford factory. No custom gauges, no racing seats, no roll cage visible to cameras. Just plain Ford Falcon upholstery and trim. This wasn't an artistic choice. It was a pure budget necessity. Custom interiors cost serious money, and the Mad Max production was broken. They spent their limited funds on external modifications that would show up on camera. The interior rarely appeared on screen anyway, so why waste money? The stock bench seat remained, covered in factory vinyl. The standard steering wheel stayed, a basic plastic Ford wheel with no padding. The dashboard was untouched, showing the original speedometer and gauges. Even the door panels were factory items, complete with Ford logos. This created weird continuity with the supposedly modified Interceptor. Here's this aggressive, supercharged-looking beast that sounds like thunder, and inside it looks like your dad's company car. The stock interior actually helped with something unexpected, though: comfort. Mel Gibson spent hours in that car during filming. A proper racing seat would have been uncomfortable for long shoots. The factory bench seat provided decent comfort during 12-hour filming days. The stock steering wheel was easier on his hands than a thin racing wheel would have been. The production did make one interior modification for the Road Warrior. They added a shotgun mount to the dashboard, but even that was just a simple bracket bolted on, removable in minutes. Everything else stayed absolutely stock throughout both films.
Number 14. It had a secret roll cage hidden in the roof.
While the interior looked stock, hidden modifications kept everyone safe. The stunt car had a complete roll cage, but not the obvious kind. Professional fabricators built a cage inside the roof structure where cameras couldn't see it. The cage was carefully designed to provide protection while remaining invisible. Steel tubes ran through the door pillars, reinforced the roof, and connected to strong points in the floor pan. Everything was hidden behind the stock headliner and door panels. From inside or outside, you couldn't tell the cage existed. This allowed the car to look normal while protecting stunt drivers during dangerous sequences. The engineering was sophisticated for a low-budget film. The cage had to be strong enough to prevent roof collapse in a rollover, but light enough not to destroy the car's handling. They used thin-wall chromoly steel tubing, the same material used in professional race cars. The installation required cutting and welding the factory body structure, permanently modifying the car. But it was necessary. The script called for high-speed chases, jumps, and potential rollovers. Without proper safety equipment, no stunt driver would touch the car. Insurance companies wouldn't allow it either. The hidden cage was a compromise between safety requirements and maintaining the stock appearance. Interestingly, the hero car used for close-ups had no roll cage at all. It wasn't needed since that car never did dangerous stunts. When you watch the film, any scene with aggressive driving is the cage stunt car. Calm dialogue scenes show the uncaged hero car. Sharp-eyed viewers can sometimes spot subtle differences in how the roof looks between these shots. Number 13. The wheels were painted stock rims. Those aggressive black wheels that give the Interceptor its menacing stance, they're just factory Ford Falcon rims painted black. No custom wheels, no expensive racing rims, just standard steel wheels with paint. The production couldn't afford aftermarket wheels. A set of quality custom rims would have cost more than they paid for the entire car. So they got creative with what came from the factory. They took the stock steel wheels, removed the factory hubcaps, and had them sandblasted. Then they painted them with matte black paint. The simple modification transformed the wheels completely. Without shiny hubcaps or trim rings, the black rims looked aggressive and purposeful. They suggested performance without costing anything beyond paint. The black wheels are also photographed better than chrome would have. Shiny chrome wheels reflect light and can cause glare problems with film cameras. Matte black eliminated that issue entirely. The wheels stayed consistent on camera without unwanted reflections or hot spots. But painted steel wheels had problems. The paint chipped easily during stunts. Any contact with curbs or debris would scrape paint off, revealing bright steel underneath. The production had to constantly touch up the wheels between takes. They went through mountains of rattle cans of black paint, keeping the wheels looking consistent. The tires were also stock. Regular street tires sold with the Falcon GT. Nothing special, no racing rubber. The tires wore out quickly during hard driving scenes. They had burned through a set of tires in a single day of chase scene filming. The production budget for replacement tires alone was substantial, even though they bought the cheapest available. Number 12. Mel Gibson couldn't drive manual transmission.
I'm gonna ram it.
Here's an embarrassing secret. Mel Gibson, the man playing Max Rockatansky, couldn't drive a manual transmission when filming started. He'd grown up in America where automatic transmissions dominated. He'd never learned to operate a clutch and shifter. This created major problems because the Interceptor had a 4-speed manual gearbox. The production couldn't afford to swap in an automatic transmission. Converting the car would cost thousands of dollars they didn't have. So they had to teach Gibson to drive stick and quickly. They had 3 days before filming scenes that required him to actually drive. A stunt coordinator spent those 3 days teaching Gibson clutch control and shifting technique. Gibson was a quick learner, but 3 days isn't enough to master manual transmission. His early driving scenes show rough, jerky shifts and occasional clutch slipping. The stunt coordinator rode in the passenger seat during many takes, calling out shift points. For more complex driving scenes, they used camera tricks to hide Gibson's limitations. Wide shots showing aggressive driving used stunt drivers wearing Gibson's costume. Close-ups of Gibson's face used the car sitting stationary with crew members rocking it. Some dialogue scenes had Gibson in the passenger seat pretending to drive, while a hidden stunt driver operated the controls from the passenger side. By the end of filming, Gibson had improved significantly. He could handle basic driving scenes competently, but for Mad Max 2. 4 years later, he'd become genuinely skilled with manual transmission. The improvement shows on screen. His driving in The Road Warrior looks natural and confident, a stark contrast to the sometimes awkward driving in the original film.
Number 11. The engine exploded during filming.
Halfway through production, disaster struck. The hero car's engine catastrophically failed during a chase scene. The Cleveland V8 had been reliable for weeks, then suddenly grenaded itself at high RPM. A connecting rod broke, punched through the engine block, and scattered metal across the road. Oil and coolant sprayed everywhere. The engine was completely destroyed beyond any repair. This happened at the worst possible time. They had already wrecked the crash car, and the stunt car's transmission was damaged. Losing the hero car's engine meant they had no drivable interceptors. Production shut down for 3 days while they scrambled for solutions. The original engine was irreplaceable within their budget. A new Cleveland V8 would cost thousands, even if they could find one quickly. So they made a controversial decision. They swapped in whatever V8 engine they could get cheap and fast. They found a used Ford 302 cubic inch Windsor V8 from a wrecked sedan. It was smaller and less powerful than the original Cleveland, but it ran. The swap took 2 days of round-the-clock work by volunteer mechanics. The Windsor engine bolted in using modified motor mounts. They had to adapt the exhaust system and cooling plumbing. The new engine made less power, noticeably so. The car was slower in subsequent chase scenes, but they made it work through creative camera angles and editing. They shot the car from angles that hid any performance differences. They used sound effects from earlier footage to maintain consistency. Audiences never knew they were watching a different, less powerful engine for the film's second half. Number 10. The famous pursuit scene used illegal street racing. The climactic pursuit scene where Max chases the bikers wasn't filmed on closed roads. They couldn't afford to shut down highways, so they did something completely insane. They filmed real high-speed chases on active public roads with real traffic. The production had no permits for most of the driving sequences. They'd scout a stretch of highway, wait for light traffic, then film as quickly as possible before police arrived. Local officers did show up several times, shutting down filming and threatening arrests. But the crew would just move to a different location and start again. The speeds were genuinely dangerous. Stunt drivers were hitting 160 kilometers per hour on public roads with civilian cars nearby. Any mistake could have caused catastrophic accidents involving innocent people. Insurance companies would have canceled everything immediately if they'd known what was happening. The production kept the illegal filming secret from insurers and authorities. They shot quickly, moved constantly, and hoped nobody got hurt. Miraculously, nobody did. The guerrilla filming style actually enhanced the footage. The real traffic in the background added authenticity that closed roads couldn't provide. The genuine danger translated to screen tension. Stunt drivers weren't acting scared, they were actually navigating real hazards at insane speeds. Modern films would never attempt this. Liability concerns and safety regulations make such filming impossible today. But in 1979, Australia, with a renegade low-budget production, they got away with it. The result was some of the most visceral, authentic car chase footage ever captured. The illegal nature of the filming remained hidden for years until crew members finally admitted the truth in later interviews. Number 9. The fuel tank was moved for safety. After several close calls with fire during stunts, the crew made a critical safety modification. They relocated the fuel tank from its factory position to a safer location. The stock Falcon kept its gas tank in the rear, behind the axle. This was standard automotive design, but dangerous for stunt work. Any rear-end impact risked rupturing the tank and causing fire. The crew had already experienced one scary incident. During a mild crash scene, the rear bumper crumpled and damaged fuel lines. Gasoline sprayed across hot exhaust pipes. Only quick action with fire extinguishers prevented disaster. After that terrifying moment, they decided to move the tank. They fabricated a custom fuel cell and mounted it inside the cabin, behind the front seats. The new location put the fuel tank ahead of the rear axle, protected by the passenger compartment. It was much safer in accident scenarios. The custom cell was smaller than the factory tank, holding only 40 liters instead of 70. This meant more frequent refueling during filming, but safety trumped convenience. The fuel cell was properly secured with steel straps and surrounded by fire-resistant material. They installed a proper racing-style filler neck, accessible through a panel in the rear side window. The modification created a new problem, though. Removing the factory tank left a large empty space in the rear. This changed the car's weight distribution, making it more front-heavy. The handling characteristics shifted noticeably. Stunt drivers had to relearn the car's balance and adjust their techniques. The Interceptor became more prone to understeer in corners because of the reduced rear weight. But everyone agreed that slightly worse handling was an acceptable trade-off for significantly improved safety.
Number 8. The front spoiler was made from plastic piping.
Hotter than a roll of dice. Step right up, chum, and watch the kid lay down.
That aggressive front spoiler that gives the Interceptor its distinctive face wasn't professionally manufactured. It was handmade from plastic plumbing pipes. The production needed a front air dam to complete the aggressive look, but custom fiberglass spoilers cost hundreds of dollars. They didn't have that kind of money for cosmetic parts. So, the prop department got creative with materials from a hardware store. They bought a large diameter PVC pipe, the kind used for drainage systems. Using heat guns, they softened the plastic and bent it into the curved shape they wanted. Multiple sections of pipe were cut, heated, formed, and bonded together with plastic adhesive. The assembled spoiler was then sanded smooth and painted matty black to match the car. From a distance, it looked like a proper aftermarket part. Up close, you could see the texture of the plastic piping, but cameras were never that close. The homemade spoiler had serious durability problems. PVC pipe isn't designed for automotive use. It's brittle and cracks easily under stress. The spoiler broke repeatedly during filming, especially during scenes involving rough roads or minor impacts. The prop department became experts at quick repairs. They had patched cracks with plastic adhesive, reinforce weak spots with fiberglass cloth, and repaint damaged sections. They probably rebuilt that spoiler a dozen times during production. For Mad Max 2, they finally invested in a proper fiberglass front spoiler. With a bigger budget, they could afford real automotive parts. But the original plumbing pipe spoiler remained part of Mad Max legend. It perfectly symbolized the film's scrappy, make-it-work-with-whatever-you-have production philosophy. That inventive spirit made the film special in ways a bigger budget couldn't have achieved. Number 7. The iconic sound wasn't the real engine. That legendary V8 rumble that makes the Interceptor sound so intimidating? It's not the actual car. The engine sounds were completely fabricated in post-production using recordings from different vehicles. The real Ford Cleveland V8 sounded good, but not spectacular. It was a normal muscle car engine with a decent exhaust note, but nothing extraordinary. Director George Miller wanted something more menacing, more primal, more memorable. The sound design team recorded multiple vehicles for the Interceptor's audio. They used a worked Chrysler Hemi engine for the deep rumble. They recorded a Kawasaki motorcycle for the high RPM sounds. They even used recordings of a Ford GT40 race car for certain acceleration sequences. All these sounds were layered together in post-production. The sound designers created a composite engine note that didn't exist in reality. It was part 5.8, part motorcycle, part race car, all mixed to create maximum aggression. The fake engine sound became one of the film's most recognizable elements. That distinctive roar when Max floors the accelerator is pure audio fiction, carefully crafted to trigger visceral responses in audiences. The sound work was so effective that real car enthusiasts tried to replicate it with their own vehicles. They couldn't. The Interceptor's sound was impossible to reproduce with a single real engine because it never came from a single real engine. The irony is that the actual Interceptor sitting on set sounded relatively ordinary. Only through movie magic did it gain that legendary voice. This disconnect between reality and fiction bothered some purists but thrilled audiences. The fabricated sound was simply better than reality, proving that sometimes lies told in service of entertainment are perfectly acceptable. Number 6. It was abandoned in a junkyard after filming.
Come on, Max, you've seen it, you've heard it. You're still asking questions.
After Mad Max wrapped, something unthinkable happened to the hero car. They abandoned it in a junkyard. The production was completely broken after finishing the film. They had no money for storage or vehicle maintenance. The Interceptor needed repairs after the brutal filming. The engine swap had been rough. The body was damaged. The paint was trashed. Fixing it properly would cost thousands they didn't have. So, they made a practical decision. They stripped off valuable parts like the supercharger and side pipes, then towed the shell to a wrecking yard in Melbourne. The car sat there for 2 years, slowly deteriorating. Weather damaged the interior. The paint oxidized and peeled. Vandals stole remaining parts. The once mighty Interceptor became just another forgotten wreck among thousands. Then Mad Max became a massive international hit. Suddenly, everyone wanted to know where the famous car was. The production company realized they'd made a terrible mistake abandoning it. They sent people to track it down. Finding the car took weeks of detective work. They visited dozens of junkyards around Melbourne. Finally, someone recognized it at a scrapyard scheduled for crushing. They arrived literally days before it would have been destroyed. The yard owner had no idea what he had. He sold the wreck for $500. The production paid it immediately and hauled away their rescued star. The car was in terrible condition, but restorable. They spent months bringing it back to life for promotional appearances. The near destruction of the Interceptor became a cautionary tale in the film industry about preserving important props. Today, movie cars are carefully preserved, but in 1979, nobody imagined Mad Max would become a cultural phenomenon worth preserving. Number 5. The steering wheel was replaced with a chain. For several shots in the film, the Interceptor's steering wheel was replaced with a chain wrapped around the steering column. This wasn't mentioned in the script or visible in most scenes, but it happened during specific stunt sequences. The stock Ford steering wheel was large and cumbersome for precision stunt driving. Stunt drivers complained that the big plastic wheel made quick corrections difficult during high-speed maneuvers. They needed something that allowed faster hand movements and better control feedback. The solution was unconventional. They removed the steering wheel completely and wrapped a heavy steel chain around the steering column shaft. The chain created a smaller diameter grip that stunt drivers could manipulate much faster. The rough texture provided excellent grip even with sweaty hands during intense driving. The chain steering setup was purely functional, never intended to be seen by audiences. They only used it for wide shots where the interior wasn't visible or during actual dangerous stunts where control was critical. For close-ups showing the interior, they had reinstalled the factory wheel. Between takes, mechanics would swap back and forth, depending on what the shot required. The chain created its own problems, though. The rough steel tore up drivers' hands during long takes. Stunt drivers had to wear gloves to prevent injuries, but gloves reduced the tactile feedback they needed. Some drivers preferred bare hands despite the damage. Several stunt drivers finished filming days with bleeding palms from gripping the chain too hard. The chain also wore against the steering column, damaging the shaft over time. This contributed to steering problems that plagued the car later in production. But for pure control during dangerous driving, nothing beat that improvised chain steering system. Number 4. The car had no working speedometer. Throughout filming, nobody knew how fast the Interceptor was actually going because the speedometer didn't work. The gauge had failed early in production, and they never fixed it. The problem started after the engine swap. When they replaced the Cleveland with the Windsor engine, they had to adapt various systems. The speedometer cable connection didn't line up properly with the new transmission. They rigged a temporary fix, but it failed within days. The speedometer needle would bounce wildly, give random readings, or just sit at 0. It was completely useless for determining actual speed. The production decided fixing it wasn't worth the time or money. They needed the car running for filming, and a working speedometer wasn't essential to that goal. Stunt drivers had to judge speed by engine sound, wind noise, and feel. This was actually dangerous during high-speed sequences. Without speedometer confirmation, drivers could easily exceed safe limits. Several times they discovered through timing equipment that the car had been going much faster than intended. One stunt driver thought he was doing 120 kilometers per hour during a chase scene. Timing equipment revealed he'd actually hit 170. That's the difference between controlled driving and potentially fatal speed. The lack of speedometer also affected continuity. Close-up shots of the dashboard showed the needle at 0, which made no sense during driving scenes. Editors had to carefully avoid showing the gauge, or used footage from early in production when it still worked. For the road warrior, the new Interceptor had a functioning speedometer. Lessons had been learned about the importance of working instruments, even if they seemed unnecessary at first glance. Number 3, it was nearly destroyed by a train. One of the most dangerous stunts nearly ended in complete disaster when the Interceptor almost collided with a real train. The scene required Max to race across railroad tracks just ahead of an approaching locomotive. The timing had to be absolutely perfect. The production couldn't afford to fake this shot. They needed the real train and the real car for authentic tension. They coordinated with the railroad company, getting permission to film during a scheduled freight train passage. The plan was simple. The Interceptor would race toward the crossing. The train would approach from the side. The car would cross with just meters to spare, creating a heart-stopping near miss. They calculated timing based on the train's speed and the car's acceleration. Everything was planned precisely, rehearsed mentally, but never physically tested. On the actual take, things went horribly wrong. The Interceptor's engine hesitated during launch, probably from the temperamental Windsor motor. That split-second delay meant the timing was off. The stunt driver realized immediately they were going to be too slow. He had a choice: brake and abort, or floor it and hope. He chose to floor it. The Interceptor's tires screamed as the driver pushed the accelerator completely down. The car shot forward with everything it had. The train's horn blasted, the engineer seeing the disaster developing. The car crossed the tracks with the train's front bumper missing it by less than 2 meters. The film shows the train's shadow actually crossing over the car's rear end. That's how close they came to complete catastrophe. The crew was silent after the take, shocked by what almost happened. The stunt driver climbed out shaking. Everyone realized they'd nearly coaled someone and destroyed their only functional car for a single shot. They got the footage they needed, but never attempted anything that dangerous again. Number 2, the original car still exists in private collection. After all the abuse, abandonment, and near destruction, the original hero car survived and exists today in a private collection. The car that was rescued from the junkyard went through multiple owners over the decades. After the promotional tour following its rescue, the production sold it again. They needed money and had no use for it long term. A collector bought it in the early 1980s for $12,000. He kept it for 15 years, occasionally showing it at car events. In the late 90s, he sold it to another collector for $60,000. Mad Max's cult status was growing, and the car's value increased accordingly. That owner held it for another decade before selling it to a wealthy Australian businessman for a rumored $300,000. The current owner, whose identity remains private, has maintained the car meticulously. He commissioned a complete restoration in the early 2000s. The work took 18 months and cost over $100,000. They repaired all the stunt damage, rebuilt the engine properly, fixed the steering issues, and restored the paint. But here's the interesting part. They maintained all the movie modifications. The fake supercharger, the side pipes, the custom fuel cell, everything stayed. They restored it to screen-accurate condition, not stock factory condition. The car occasionally appears at major automotive events under tight security. The owner rarely drives it, keeping mileage minimal to preserve value. Insurance companies estimate its current worth at over $1 million. That $3,500 police car has become a seven-figure collectible. The car's survival is remarkable considering how close it came to destruction multiple times. It remains a functioning piece of cinema history, a testament to both the film's impact and one vehicle's unlikely journey from cop car to junkyard wreck to million-dollar treasure. Number 1. George Miller hated the car initially. Here's the most surprising secret of all. Director George Miller initially hated the Ford Falcon XB and fought against using it. Miller had a completely different vision for the Interceptor. He wanted something more exotic, more obviously futuristic. He'd sketched designs for a custom-built vehicle, something that looked like no production car anyone had seen. His dream Interceptor was low and wedge-shaped, like a concept car from a motor show. It would have required building from scratch, creating custom bodywork over a space-frame chassis. The estimated cost was $80,000, nearly half the film's entire budget. Producers explained this was impossible. They didn't have that kind of money for a single vehicle. Miller argued that the car was essentially a character in the film and deserved proper investment. The producers refused. They had to use a production car modified within a tiny budget. Miller was furious. Production designer John Dowding found the Ford Falcon XB and brought Miller to see it. Miller's first reaction was disappointment. He thought it looked too ordinary, too recognizable as a regular car. Australian audiences would immediately identify it as a Falcon. Where was the futuristic mystique? Dowding convinced him to see the car with modifications added. They mocked up the side pipes with cardboard. They placed a dummy supercharger on the hood. They showed Miller how simple modifications could transform the ordinary Falcon into something special. Miller remained skeptical but agreed to try it. He demanded the car be painted matte black to make it less recognizable. He insisted on removing all Ford badges and chrome trim. Slowly, as modifications continued, Miller's opinion changed. By the time filming started, he'd fallen in love with the Interceptor. Years later, he admitted that the producers were absolutely right, and his custom-built dream car would have been an expensive mistake. Sometimes the best creative decisions come from budget limitations forcing practical solutions. The 1973 V8 Interceptor remains one of cinema's most iconic vehicles, and these hidden secrets prove that legend often comes from chaos, improvisation, and near disaster. From fake superchargers to illegal street racing, from junkyard rescues to million-dollar valuations, this wasn't just a movie car. It was a survivor, a testament to what passionate filmmakers can achieve with almost no money and tremendous determination. George Miller and his crew transformed an ordinary Australian muscle car into a post-apocalyptic icon that defined an entire genre. If you enjoyed these secrets, smash that like button and subscribe for more automotive legends and filmmaking mysteries. Drop a comment telling us which fact shocked you most. Did you know about the fake supercharger? Were you surprised the engine exploded mid-filming? Let us know, and we'll see you in the next video where we uncover more secrets hiding in cinema's greatest vehicles.